You mentioned with the Battle of Ebo that most of the combat took place in the first 3 hours and the remaining 6 hours were largely mopping up.
Okay. Um, yes, that is true. All the rescue attempts were in the beginning, even though some. You have to understand that in a combat situation like that, time telescopes and microscopes, so you really lose track of what the time frame is. But what I am saying is that the rescue attempts were launched, but the guys that were initially in the Death Acre, meaning the 14 cars on the ground, 15 if you're counting Chris Tiransko, our squadron commander, that was behind the ridge. Only with the latter part of the battle did other armored cars come in to try and recover cars that are stuck. At one stage, at the end of the battle, Kreis gave the order to shoot out blue on blue. The armor guys refused blatantly. They said, "You don't know that whether our mates are alive or dead. In those cars, we believe them to be alive. We won't do it." So he later sent in artillery officers as crew commanders of cars and tasked them to shoot at the cars. Fortunately, they didn't go into the primary Death Acre because there's two distinct areas. I call the primary Death Acre, which was covered by indirect fire, but also covered with anti-tank direct weapons. And the secondary Death Acre was only indirect fires, 122 and mortars. So the rescue attempt took place in the primary Death Acre. And that's where the armored guys were involved in the rescuing. The ones that got decorated never went beyond the secondary Death Acre. So, just by plain logic, who was more in danger for doing deeds? The ones in the primary or the ones in the secondary? Why was only decorations written for the ones in the secondary? Logical explanation is, at that stage there could have been a senior officer on the ground that wrote the decorations for these people that did do brave deeds. There was no one that wrote for the first part of the battle when the real rescue attempts took place.
Can you mention the rescue attempts from Bok Creel?
Okay, Bok I covered on lightly. We went in first on our own accord. He got wounded, we withdrew, and then the car was useless. I mean, you can't go in with main armament without the additional Browning. You couldn't fire the main gun. So he sent us back, which we ignored, and he jumped into Aubrey Kluter's car. Aubrey ran away, he jumped into that car with a new crew, and while John was lending fire support on the edge of the primary Death Acre, he was lending fire support. Bok went in under his covering fire and picked up Gert Botha, brought him up, and then lent firing support to that car, and John Wall went in. Okay, then there was a situation where the 122 exploded, and Talyat, who was also on the scene at the time, also helping load UNITA bodies and trying to lend a hand. And without Bok's support, John went in the second time. Nobody believed it was going to make it, but he picked up the driver as well the second time. Only people that got decorated were the people that were in the latter part of the battle. Why? Probably logic. Holland was dead. He probably could have done something about it. Our squadron commander was at the back with the mortars. He didn't have sight on the target. Kreis probably passed the buck or said, "No, you go and handle it at your mother unit." And there the politics kick in. Commanding officer that was more interested in rugby, his name was Dolph Karstens. He's passed away. He wasn't interested, he didn't want to make waves. So I think Christian did his best to address this, but he had to do it on second-hand information. He had to do a debriefing with what he thought the people were involved. And now other people jumped on the bandwagon saying, no, I was the one that went in to go and collect so-and-so. And he, the debrief weren't done with the rank and file. It was done with the troop leaders.
Mm.
And I think one can understand it, but that certain information items were conveyed incorrectly. But enough time have now elapsed, and enough has come forward, and eyewitnesses' account have come forward to say, this is the real truth. Why aren't we doing something about it now? And the rest of the guys are just shaking their hands and saying, too late, sorry. I mean, I firmly believe that Chris Duran, for one, supports our cause. But what can he do? He's sitting in the Middle East somewhere. He's not with the Savannah Foundation, as far as I know. And they basically want to ignore him, okay, ignore us. That's what it boils down to. Luck of the draw. Wrong time, wrong place.
Could you speak about your role as the spokesperson for Veterans of Savannah?
Well, it's a self-appointed role, Barry, but first of all I need to say is that I'm not doing this for myself. I'm not suffering of any delusions. In a normal situation, the guy that gets decorated is either the troop leader or crew commander. The whole crew doesn't, each and every one, get a decoration. One of the crew gets it, wears it as his individual property, but it's actually for the whole crew. It's a silly, stupid rule because he can't function. What does he do? Carry the armored car in on his back? Drives it and shoots it at the same time? So everyone has a part. But I'm not under that delusion that I will qualify for a decoration. It would be nice to recognize it, yes, in the form of maybe a bar for my MMM. Now, I'm not going to say no. I'm speaking for the guys that desperately deserve it, that guys that did brave deeds like Talyat and died on the scene and never got recognized for this. How? Why? Somebody have to speak up for these guys. Somebody have to take the quantum leap and say, hey, authority, take up and sit up and take note now. Time is now to address it. What do you want us to do? Wait another 39 years? And just or do you want to sweep it under the carpet to hide away something? That's my question. What the hell do they want to hide away? What effort is it going to be to make some effort to try and address the wrongs of the past? Is that too much to ask? I don't think so.
Could you comment on the command and control of the opposition that you ran into at Ibo?
Excellent. You could clearly see Ruel Diaz was in charge, Cuban Special Forces. His contingent was, some stats say 60 Cuban Special Forces. Some say a platoon 30 and 60 FAPLA. I have it on record, but I don't refer to notes when talking about this. My head is full of it. I don't check notes. I can definitely get the right figures, but immaterial. He had a large number of special forces. They were well trained. He was well trained. He did his proper terrain appreciation. You could see the initial defensive positions outside when you left Ebu. They decided at one stage it's not good enough, vacated that in a hurry, went and dug in after a proper terrain appreciation. He probably shot in on the terrain to zero his mortars, to zero his 122s. He deployed the correct OPs. The same cannot be said for our side. The most basic appreciation was not made, which is a terrain appreciation. And any officer worth his salt. I learned later on in life, I learned about tactics, and I was taught by the best. Any one of the senior officers now turns around and tells me I'm talking shit, must rethink their approach, because they were trained officers the same way that I got trained later, and the barest basics were ignored, even after repetitive warnings. One being, you go on the terrain, you have a look at it, and you say, oh shit, this is dangerous. Oops, a warning shot. There is enemy there. Oops, a spotter plane. There is something there. And the evidence when you went out of Ebo, they said they were here. It's very fresh. All of that were ignored. And a guy like Chris can get away with passing the buck. He didn't appreciate. He left it to Holland. He blames Holland, who's conveniently dead, that he should have reappreciated. Where does the buck stop? He was the battle group commander. Holland was the battle on the day. Didn't he have to carry some form of responsibility? Didn't he have a buffer role to play from higher headquarters saying, hurry, you have to do it in a hurry? Didn't he have a responsibility to say, the safety of my men is my concern? No. Safety and welfare of your men. Keeping your men informed, the most basic principle of leadership, just blew out of the window. They can tell me I'm wrong and say operational planning took place. It did not. At the back headquarters, they had their whiskey and they had enough rations. They never did proper appreciations. How do I know this? We weren't raw troopies before Ebo. We were like battle hardened with a lot of battles behind us where we practice our drills. We weren't raw recruits. We weren't stupid about the terrain. We worked together as a team. And I know they didn't do proper appreciations because up until Ebo, we had to work from Caltech roadmaps. So how the hell could they have done a terrain appreciation with a proper military map? They didn't. Show me your operational orders. Those that oppose this view, show me out of archives. Where's your operational orders? Where's your confirmation notes that you gave orders? Each and every one of them had a clock that could take these notes. Where's your war diary? 30 years have come and gone. There's no more restriction on the classification of information. It's open. Why can't we find these things in the archives? Were they destroyed? And why? Did they ever exist? I leave that one hanging in the air. Show me one OPSO and I will change my point of view. Show me one confirmation note, because that is what safeguards a commanding officer. Here is my orders I gave. If something seriously goes wrong and there's a tribunal or a board of inquiry or even a court-martial, that's a safeguard. This is the orders I gave based on the tactical situation. Don't blame me. Blame the execution as a defense, for example, which doesn't normally wash, but it's basically the point I'm trying to get across. The basics were ignored, and they don't want this to be exposed as their weakness. And I'm sorry, we've kept quiet for too long. We were sacrificed for bugger all and discarded.
With your subsequent career in the SADF, you as an individual, What effect did the lack of recognition for your involvement with Savannah, including Ebo, have on your future military career?
Well, very, 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 very basic, very easy to explain. After Savannah, we were kept away from the rest of the military that weren't part of Savannah. The rest of the military didn't know what happened on the ground because it was still a closely guarded secret. That was available in the media uh, was only gleaned from what Defence Headquarters decided to share and interviews with the self-same officers that I'm accusing of incompetence. So I served under commanding officers who weren't part of Savannah. Whenever I spoke in closed circles about our experience, the question would always be, or statement would be, you a wannabe. If this really happened, where's your decoration? I never had the decoration for reasons that I perceive to be the logical ones that I just explained. But how do I counter that? You don't even know what happened, Colonel? Now you tell me I'm a wannabe because I do not have the decoration. If this did happen, it is logical that you will wear the decoration. It just adds major insult to injury. That's all it did, and it made me very, very bitter.
Results of the difficulty in coordination and your lack of knowledge of the presence of other SADF troops.
Yeah, that's a very serious one because own forces were deployed in the same geographical area. I can show you photographs of how we were dressed. One set of uniform, prisoners uniform, no belt, no boots, bata tackies, one pair of socks, no sleeping bag. The clothes rotted off your body in the rain. Socks was the first thing that went. After 2 weeks, what's the first thing you do? You cut up the tackies like sandals just to give your feet the space to breathe. Whenever somebody came to a Fapla store or a Cuban store, they would liberate a cap or something for the sun. So everybody had long hair, the beards that a 19-year-old could grow. If you weren't informed of those forces, and they weren't informed of you, we could have killed each other like flies by just seeing the other party, because the rule was simple. Some battle groups had the rule, yes, fire only when fired upon. We decided after the first couple of contacts, shoot first, then ask questions, my mate. Therein lies the survival. So it's just basically, keeping your men informed, having a concern for the other men on the ground was something that was just ignored. And that's criminal. For any leader, that is criminal. I think, that's basically what I want to say about that. Now we learn in our group about these guys that were there at the same time. And you go ice cold, you say. We could have killed you. We wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Didn't these people think? I mean, my astonishment is of such a magnitude that I still can't get my head around it.
Presumably there would have been far greater efficiency if there was more coordination, if you could have had support from people in the infantry role than you have.
Yeah, we desperately needed our white infantry trained according to the same standards as us. We had to do with the rebel scum UNITA. When the first shot fired, they disappeared. The rules of engagement with infantry armor is the infantry will clear the obstacles for you, will clear the defiles for you. An armored car is not designed for that role. It's not a tank. It is a reconnaissance vehicle. You need the infantry support to be the eyes on the ground, to clear the obstacles. The first shot gets fired with UNITA, they're gone. Their return fire is firing into the air. And that never changed throughout the border war. They remained scum, and we backed the scum, the wrong horse, the whole bloody time. It's like, it's like a compulsive gambler. You just throw in money after money after money to recuperate. We had our own infantry. They would never have stopped us. Never ever. Like was shown at Bridge 14. The guys deployed in conjunction with the armor, maybe not at the same time, and look at the successes of Bridge 14. How different could Ebu have been if a plain basic training appreciation was done on terrain and given picture and things like that. Any commander, lieutenant above, would have said, infantry, right flank, roll them up from the side where they're vulnerable. Armor, give fire support from where you are. That never happened. We had to take the shots from our blind little cars, one after the other, 7 shots out on the day. I don't even want to talk about the losses. It was just, if you count in the UNITA, and at that stage, at that day we had FNLA, deployed with us as well for the first time, which was slightly better than UNITA, but still useless. The moment the 122s came down, it was pathetic to see these guys looking for cover on registered targets like the gravel road, the junction, and they just got blown to bits. So, as far as I'm concerned, up to Ebu and Ebu, we never had infantry support, and it could have been a 500% improvement, if one can think of such a figure.
You've mentioned the logistical problems such that as an armoured car squadron you actually ran out of high explosive and were then told or suggested improvise with your high explosive anti-tank, which is impossible. What's your understanding of why you had such logistical difficulties?
I think there's 2 main factors. The one is logistics was in its infancy, and the SADF learned very quickly thereafter that logistics is very important. Secondly is that the war escalated so suddenly, and the need for us to be on various fronts at such a tempo that no logistical plan, even if it did exist, would have been able to cope with that. I'll add on a third reason, and that is we had to make do with one airfield, and that was swarming with UNITA. So the moment stuff got offloaded and international journalists, so the moment stuff got offloaded there, it probably got stolen by UNITA, or it had to be transported about 60 kilometers south, where we started our combined training with UNITA at a place called Kapolo, which was a prison compound, a prison town basically. So in the process of transporting the logs from Silverport to Kapolo, probably more got stolen. There were more UNITA than us at Kapolo because there was a small training team left after we started deploying, and only later on in the war did they establish a depot at Silverport. It was at Nunnery, and then we managed to secure another airfield at Sela, and things improved. But in our time, we died of hunger, or we shut ourselves to death from food out of date. Ammo. How do you go to war without ammo? How do you go to sleep without a sleeping bag? I mean, this is the basics that any soldier lays claim on. It's mine. Nope, didn't have.
And personal weapons?
Not allowed. South African made. Only after a couple of days, if not weeks, at Kapolo did Savannah come and issue us with baby 9mm Brownings, or the Browning short. Nice firearm. That's our gift from him, personal firearm, which of course upon our return the MPC immediately confiscated, and it was never handed into a store like everything else that we managed to pick up. It would have been proof that we were there, so the powers that be said, take away anything foreign, and the MPs are the collectors nowadays, military police.
Could you speak about your expectations when you found you were being sent on what you now know to be Savannah?
I think all of us at the stage, I recall we had one briefing. I still maintain I was never exposed to any order group. I'm not saying no order groups took place. I said I wasn't involved as a gunner of the second in command car with any order group. We were doing border duty, and then we took a trip down to Bloemfontein, only to get armored cars ready and to drive from Bloemfontein to Ondongwa to get put on an airport to fly straight to Silverporto. And prior to that, you know, a C-160, C-130 takes 2 armored cars. So it takes quite a while to fly in a squadron that distance. And you had preparations to do, like get your prison uniform, you know, scratch off everything South African on your toothpaste, on any personal effect you want to take in. So there was a briefing where I think it was an intelligence officer, I can't recall, very broadly told us, we're embarking on an exercise to go into Angola. Those of you that do not want to partake are now free to leave. There was definitely one, I believe, probably 3, that I saw walk out. Mostly the one guy I know was a technical service at Tiffy. And only then did they continue with the briefing, when the ones that didn't want to go. But logically, you kids, here's a chance, here's an adventure. And we all firmly believed in the propaganda bullshit that the politicians and generals pumped our way about the rooi gevaar and God knows what else, and communism, and I have my serious doubts about all of this now. If they denounced us after our return, how the hell can you believe what they said in the beginning? We don't know you, you were never there. So our expectations were, the briefing said, that we're just going in for a limited period of time, because there were peace accords on the go, and the three factions, FNLA, MPLA, and UNITA, would go to the polling booth. And the South African government and the general staff decided to support UNITA to establish a bigger geographical area and therefore have a bigger voting base, just based on pure geographics, not taking into consideration the bad track record UNITA already had with the local population. So that was another fallacy. And then something made the peace accord and the planned elections fall through. So while we were in Angola, you know, the decision was made, now we wipe out communism, and that means every living creature, cat, dog, chicken, that supports this vile course. That's actually the motivational speech that Holshausen gave us. Those exact words, or some close facsimile, before we turned up north to head for Sela, the pig farm, Ebu, and eventually Bridge 40. So